It's back. Restaurant Expert Roundup. We're a Friday. We are episode 146 with Mr. Jonathan Maze. We're not going to get lost in a maze, but he's going to lead us through the maze of restaurants, of franchises, and a couple things he's got going on as he travels to Dubai pretty soon. Jonathan, welcome back. This is your second time on the podcast.
Yes, it is. Thanks for having me on again.
You're welcome. With the knowledge you dropped the first time, I always reach out to Gabe, who helps me coordinate all these. And I'm like, hey, don't bring this person back. Bring this person back. And you were one. I'm like, this guy's got to be on the list. Let's cyber stalk him until we get him back on again. So thanks for coming back on. I guess tell the audience out there who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Sure. I'm Jonathan Maze. I'm the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business Online, which is an online magazine, business-to-business publication focused on the broader restaurant industry. We cover both chains and independents and everything in between. And my job is, besides overseeing the publication, is I cover the Fs. I cover fast food, finance, and franchising. Okay. And I've done that for a little bit. 16 years. I'm losing track. Time has no meaning for me anymore, but I've been doing this for a little bit. And I write a blog called The Bottom Line, have a podcast called The Deeper Dive, have a newsletter, throw myself out there on TikTok on occasion. So yeah, yep. So we do quite a bit.
Hey, you put a lot of great content out, a lot of insightful things that would really help a lot of operators, understand the next level of business. I know you go to a lot of shows. You mentioned the Restaurant Leadership Conference coming up here in April. I'll be out there. Myself and a couple of people are doing actually a one-day before event leading into it. And you're heading to Dubai like this evening, right?
Tonight, yes. Yes. Tonight. And that is for the Global Restaurant Leadership Conference, which is a sort of a global version of an international version of the Restaurant Leadership Conference. And I'll be hosting a couple sessions there. Probably the big one is Paul Brown, who is the CEO of Inspire Brands, owner of Arby's and Buffalo Wild Wings and Dunkin', and I'll be interviewing him and among other things.
I love it. So let's dig into a couple questions I have, and anything you want to cover as well. I'm wide open. A guy of your knowledge, everybody can learn. I remember our first time we spoke, you talked about that you dealt in the franchising world, and one of the things that I struggle with, and from a understanding side, is that there's not a blueprint for franchising that I've seen. There's not like, hey, this is exactly what a franchise supplies to its franchisees. And, I had two issues recently when I was talking to franchisees of restaurants. And the one guy, this was going back about a year and a half, where the layout of the restaurant was really weird. Like I'd never seen like you walked in the front door, you turned left, you went by the soda machine, you walked down to the counter, you ordered your food, you then came all the way back around and got your drink. And I remember like the first time I saw it, I'm like, I'm not a genius. I'm not a architect by any means. Like, but who, the franchise gave you this layout? And he's like, oh no, they just told me to do what I really liked. And they just kind of had this vibe. And I was like, wow, that seems kind of weird. If I'm buying a franchise, I'm buying their expertise on what's worked in their other locations and all that good stuff. And then the other side of it is the marketing side, where we run across a lot of franchises that are buying something. They might be like this guy was actually one location in our area, and there was like 20 other locations, some 4 states away. And it's like, wow, you're going outside of your area. Nobody knows you in this place. What separates your food from anybody else? And how is this restaurant kind of market? And they had no answers. It was kind of like him on his own. So what do you see, and what would your expectations be as an industry that to make sure success happens at the franchise level, what a franchise or should give that person?
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned it. There's supposed to be experts. I mean, the idea of a franchise, the idea is that the system is created for you. You're buying access to a system, to marketing, to real estate expertise, to everything is supposed to be roughly created for you. And your job is basically to provide the financing and the day-to-day operations. That should be how it works.
Yeah.
As a franchisee. The problem that you're stating is a probably the single worst problem in franchising, period, is that there's no real, oh, I mean, there are blueprints that can work. But there are so many franchises out there. And so many of them are so desperate to get a sale, to get sales quickly, and don't necessarily put the right thought or the right investment into that franchise, that it leads to a very wide range of outcomes of styles and strategies, and a lot of them don't work. So, I mean, no matter how you want a franchise, and there are a lot of different ways to do it. So there's no real one size fits all. But at the very least, you're supposed to be providing sort of this guidance for this franchisee. This, you should have, especially a restaurant, you should have a prototype that they would build. You should have design standards, simply because if you don't have that design standards, you lose one of the big, potential benefits of a franchise, which is you have consistency from operations from one place to the next, right? People know the great thing about McDonald's is it doesn't matter. I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to go, I very well might go into a McDonald's because I'm that kind of a nerd. But I know that it's going to be roughly the same. I mean, the menu will be different, things like that. But I mean, it'll be roughly the same as the one that I go here in Minnesota. And, that consistency is super, super important. So if you're not going to do basic things like create a design for them, or, and marketing is another whole other thing, because you're supposed to have brand power, and marketing is a key element for it. And, I mean, there are all sorts of discussions about control of marketing and things like that, but functionally, the brand should sort of oversee how the brand is marketed and things like that. That is supposed to be what the company does. So, really a good franchise is going to provide these things that make it easier for the franchisee to operate good restaurants. Of course, another key thing they're going to be doing is being very selective about the franchisees that they choose, because, I mean, your franchisee is the person on the ground operating the restaurant. And if they do a bad job, then you're going to have a bad store, and that leads to a bad system. So, it is, I think, a lot more work to franchise a business than a lot of these franchisors think it is.
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly. I've seen restaurant companies that, will take anybody with a pulse. And then I've talked to other people that are like, hey, no, I don't care if you got a pulse. I don't care if you got $10 million cash. I don't care if you own 40 car washes. You've never owned a restaurant. You just told me you want it to be passive income, that you're never going to walk in it. I'll pass on having that associated with my brand, because it's going to negatively affect that brand's ability to maybe have 20 stores in that city. If all of a sudden you got Yahoo operators that aren't involved. We actually just had a restaurant brand we worked with, that one of their franchisees, that we worked with 3 of their stores, and majority of our clients are independents, but we do have the occasional franchise. And this one franchise closed. And I'll never forget, because we did a bad job taking them on as a client, to be quite honest. Like we've gotten a little stricter with questioning the owners that we bring on from a marketing standpoint, because we can do a lot of cool things, but we can do even more. We have even more traction when there's an owner that's inside the 4 walls. And after about 3 months of seeing what this client was doing, I reached out and I found out that they owned an insurance agency, and they actually didn't work in the restaurant. And our account managers and our success coaches were saying, hey, here's what we think you ought to do based on, hundreds of restaurants that would support all of this and help you with your community marketing, your online. We're not in there ever. And their managers change every week because they're not in there running the business. And they eventually went out of business after about a year, because they weren't built for it. They thought they were buying a rental property that was on autopilot. I'm like, shit, restaurants are a much different animal than a rental property.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what franchising is supposed to be about. Yeah. It's about an owner operator. I mean, the way franchising grew and the whole theory behind it was you have somebody in the restaurant managing the day-to-day business who had a financial incentive to do a good job running the restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, now obviously it has evolved and changed, and there are a lot more very sophisticated and very large franchisees out there, but functionally that's supposed to be how that model is supposed to work. And when you don't have your operator in there on a day-to-day basis, you know, you're definitely, it's also harder to make a profit financially because you have to pay for a manager, you have to pay for the tasks that you would be providing otherwise. But then also you just don't have that owner mentality in there. The other thing, you know, the worst, you know, of the times I've been covering it, I've been covering franchising for a long time, and I used to cover it, you know, not just restaurants but other industries. Without question, the worst franchise situations in history have all been because the franchisor sold to franchises to too many people who could not do the job, and they were not financially ready. They were not. They did not have the knowledge, or some combination thereof. If you look at what happened, you know, the Burger Room situation is a perfect example. If you know what that is,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, now that's the most extreme example we
Yep.
will ever find, or at least it wasn't in my lifetime. But you know, that in that situation, they were literally selling to anybody as fast as they could to get money.
Yep. Get that franchise.
And that situation plays out, you know, not to that extreme. It does play out frequently, because you get these franchisors that just want to sell as many of these things as quickly as they can, and they sell to bad franchisees who don't have enough money, who are in bad locations, and they don't really set them up very well for success. So, you know, it's when in a franchise, if it's too good to be true, probably is.
Yep.
That's basically it.
Yeah. Now let's shift gears a little. So you said you're interviewing, who's the gentleman you're interviewing? That's the CEO of Arby's and
Paul Brown.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a CEO of Inspire Brands, which is a large multi-concept. It owns Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Dunkin', Jimmy John's, and probably blanking out, but and Sonic.
Okay. So here's something I think is interesting. I was just reading this last night. I flew home last night from Miami, grabbed a special edition of the Harvard Business Journal, one of the airport kiosks, and it was all about digital marketing and the phone, and how there was a picture. The cover of this magazine was great. It was a phone with a bullseye on the back of it and an arrow. And in there was a lot of great articles, and one that really stuck out to me the most, and this will relate right to this gentleman, is that I always pick on Papa John's. I'm in Kentucky, Papa John's, Kentucky owned, and by, you know, Mr. Papa John used to himself down there, but now, you know, another company. But their social media just cracks me up, because they've got 6.7 million followers on Facebook, and their average Facebook post gets 200 or 300 interactions, which means that they've literally lost the entire algorithm and there's nobody paying attention. But this article was talking about that type of content, how a lot of restaurants at that level have lost touch with what's the phone is all about. It's not radio and TV and billboards. It's engagement. It's creative content. A couple of things that stuck out to me, and I'll get your opinion. Like, number one, of the 500 top Instagram and YouTube accounts, there's only 3 brands in there, major brands. The rest are creators and individual brands that aren't Fortune 500 companies. So 3 Fortune 500 companies are in that top 500, which is wild to me, because they got the most damn money. I mean, I'm in Cincinnati by Procter & Gamble. They got a lot of money, but not even anywhere to be spoken of on those topics. But the one thing they talked about, which was really relevant to me, was they were talking about a lot of the big brands. I can't say this is accurate for Dunkin' and Buffalo Wild Wings and Arby's, but a lot of them are like this. They're targeting, number one, the people running the marketing at the corporate level are a lot younger. And number two, right now, 5 to 10% of the advertising dollars being spent digitally are going after people 50 plus. Whereas 50 plus represents the largest growth every year of people using their phone and the internet and social media. And for me, I love it, because we're a nimble company. I can help independent restaurants and franchisees nimbly target that audience that everybody's ignoring and get better CPMs. But is that the type of stuff you're talking to the CEO about to find out like what they're doing different? I mean, does that surprise you that everybody's ignoring? Like I'm 46, so I'm close to being ignored. My dad's older, he's 75, but they're ignoring everybody from me to my dad.
Yeah. Look, man, I'm 52. Everybody ignores me. Nobody pays me any attention. Yep. That's a really good point. And you don't see a ton of brands out there doing that. One perfect example of the mentality that you see in a lot of brands is, it was stated by Howard Schultz, recently with Starbucks, and he basically said that they want younger consumers. That's who they want. And there's a general, I think, feeling that the older, advertising works less, with the older you get, marketing does not quite take as well as it does with younger consumers. You feel that, maybe when people are older, they have, they've sort of made their decisions, and things like that. But, it's a big group, and, it's a group that, frankly, I can tell you that, in the restaurant industry, it's the one where probably restaurants need to do the most work to get people back in. So you've got this aging population, and that older group, people my age and above, our visits to restaurants are slowing. Especially when you get into the baby boom population, and so it's a group that the industry needs to recover some of this traffic that they've been losing really for the past 2 years. So getting to that point where, doing a better job of marketing to that particular group, and maybe marketing on social and in places like that makes a ton of sense, because I joined TikTok, for crying out loud, which still drives my kids nuts.
Yeah. Well, to me, I hate the thought process of the marketing world. It's what I'm in, that people 45, 50 plus are more set in their ways. That's the farthest from the truth for me. And, I look at myself, who's 46 and you're 53. And then I look at, just to pick on her, because I saw her a minute ago, my niece who works here, who just turned 23. Like, there's a big difference in the amount of income, the amount of savings, comfortability. And like, you know what? My wife, like, I'm done cooking at home. We quit cooking at home 7-8 years ago. We eat out 7 days a week. And what I love the most about it, and this goes back to something that happened on accident about 6 years ago. One of our clients, pizza brand, was on a couple college campuses, and we were near the college campus. And so we had the restaurant here, the consumers over here, the college campus here. And so the restaurant's like, hey, we want to try and reach the college students again. Let's try and reactivate them. And so Ashley on my team did something that, because she handles it herself, I'm not involved in it, but she did something I wouldn't have done. She activated, instead of Instagram, she did a split test with Instagram and Facebook, and she went hardcore 18 to 21-year-olds on Facebook. Well, if you listen to all the experts and you look at all the data, they aren't on Facebook supposedly like everybody else. But here's what we found out. They are. They're not on as often, but they're on longer periods of time. But here was the cool part about it. Every other company, because most marketing advertising dollars that I've seen is influenced by Coke and Procter & Gamble and Pepsi and Bud Light and Arby's and McDonald's. But when you're a one location restaurant, you're the minority. And when every one of those brands has said, 18 to 21-year-olds aren't on Facebook, nobody's competing for that advertising segment. Now the inventory is wide open. We were getting 20-cent customers from Facebook ads, 18 to 21 on a college campus, versus $1.50 to $2 adults, which was the target for the restaurant. But they said, we might as well try this college thing again. And because the reason the college thing never worked was they were buying advertising where everybody else was buying the 18 to 21-year-old, and it was expensive as shit. And it was a lot of competition. Now, all of a sudden, Ashley wisely goes to Facebook and goes, this is working like gold, because nobody else is looking for him here. And I tell you that story because I look at that with the 50-year-olds. Like, people aren't looking for the 50-year-old on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok. I can tell you my wife's 46. She's on TikTok as much as any 21-year-old. You know, I'm 46. I'm on YouTube, LinkedIn all the time. And the opportunity. So like you look at these brands like Arby's, and why I love dealing with independents is that the guy you're going to meet with Arby's, it's a cruise ship that if they decide they want to make this switch, they got to have 500 meetings. And by the time they get 6 months in and decide to make a change, like the marketing director's fired. And it's like, it's just slowly turning. Whereas if you're a one location pizza joint in Florence, Kentucky, and you go, hey, TikTok, oh, hey, Facebook. So I think there's something to be said also about the cost efficiencies, because everybody ignores that audience on those platforms and it's easier to find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, it's kind of like when you open a restaurant, a brand restaurant in a small town, sometimes you get a massive response in some of those towns because they're very excited for you to be there. Whereas if you opened one in Minneapolis or Las Vegas, it's just sort of another restaurant. You don't get quite that attention. But when you can focus on like a mid-size or smaller city, you can actually get some real good traction and things like that. It kind of works the same way when you are when you're online, because I mean, you're right. Nobody is really targeting people our age or above. And my wife, just like yours, is always on TikTok and Instagram, and she's playing little games and things like that. I mean, constantly. We watch some television. We don't really watch television in my house between my wife and I. And the two kids, where we are much more on any of these video channels.
Yeah. Oh, my viewing of media nowadays consists of either occasionally Netflix, and like the last 3 times I've watched Netflix have been on my damn phone or my laptop. And then the other aspect is like my phone. I have a hot tub and I get in it 2 or 3 times a day, and I take my phone out there, lean it against the little ledge, and I'll watch 15, 20-minute YouTube podcasts and interviews, things that are relevant to my industry or my passions. I don't watch NBC, ABC, CBS, cable, DirecTV. I mean, I don't watch any of that shit. And it cracks me up because that's where the money's going still. It's almost like the Yellow Pages. I remember I've been in marketing since 99. And I remember when I started my current company in 2008, and I was actually doing a video tour for some friends earlier. And on the other side of our office, we have 9,000 square feet here. On the top floor, the one hallway's got articles of me in local papers talking about the internet marketing world for our different businesses back in 04, 05, 06. And I remember in 08, 09, when all the Yellow Pages ignored the internet, and they were all ignoring it. Like, oh, now we're still here. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, and they could have been the ones they could have been Google, but they didn't. And then you look at radio and TV, it's the same way. Is that these brands, probably like Arby's, if I turn on my local radio right now, I can promise you Arby's and all these other companies are going to be bombarding the airwaves. I couldn't tell you the last time I listened to my radio. And so it's the attention's on the phone. And I don't think there's any denying that. But it's what I'm excited about too, is like when I'm seeing these stats and I'm seeing these major companies ignore the 50-year-olds online, I'm like, bring it on. Cause that's my chance to help the small mom and pop shift and find them. Mm-hmm. What else is out there? Anything new and exciting or something that like, what's one of your big burning desire questions you're going to ask Paul Brown, which is a weird name to say because Cincinnati Bengals were founded by Paul Brown. So I'm thinking that Paul Brown.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll ask him whether he's related to him or not. I mean, it's kind of a conference on international development. So like even if you're like a emerging chain and you want to get bigger, you actually have to think about growing in international markets. It's kind of important because U.S. restaurant business, as anybody who's listening to this probably knows, is really tough and it's very saturated, and making it here is a challenge, and the competitive landscape is getting worse in terms of your ability to compete in this particular market. I think the pandemic has made that abundantly clear. because these big guys, I mean, your Inspire brands of the world, your McDonald's and Burger Kings can throw a lot of money at any problem.
Yeah.
They can spend a lot of money on social marketing, even while they continue to hit the regular airwaves. Whereas, your smaller company can't do that.
Yeah.
But so expanding in international markets where maybe the markets were a little bit more open and a little bit easier to deal with and are kind of smaller in some respects too. That's kind of where a lot of this industry's growth is actually outside the United States. So that's kind of where what we'll be talking about and sort of what it means for Inspire. Inspire Brands actually a really interesting company. Paul Brown came from outside the restaurant industry. He was working in hotels.
Okay.
And he saw what happened with the hotel industry in the 1990s when the internet first emerged. And then you had companies such as Priceline and Orbitz that, and that basically did away with the travel agency and then immediately took a huge percentage, a massive chunk of the reservation business. And it really, really had a massive influence on the hotel industry and led to really decades worth of consolidation. And the restaurant industry is kind of in the beginning stages of that. So you're going to see really over a long time, you're going to see a lot more, continue to see more restaurant chains merge and combine really to sort of get economies of scale to sort of meet these challenges sort of presented by a lot of the things that we're talking about in technology and things like that. So, and that's kind of what Inspire was created to do was to get that kind of economy. So, and the international development piece is just one of them.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I travel a lot. I've not been to Dubai, but I've been to a lot of other countries, and it is wild when I was in the Dominican Republic 2 years ago, and like you're in the middle of this crazy, what do you call it? The private resorts, and you get out into the real world, and then you see one Subway or you see one Domino's, and you can see where the potential's there because these people love that. They finally get to see what that's all about. So yeah, there's no doubt about it. International for some of these brands is where the opportunity is to grow, especially if you can figure it out. For me, that would intimidate the shit out of me because I know we had our boat dealership and we had 3 stores and the one was 2.5 hours away. It was tough. I wasn't built and I wasn't experienced or seasoned enough entrepreneur to understand how to manage that team remotely and have systems and processes. And so I could only think about having another Matt Plapp to manage in Dubai. It would be interesting for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it can be challenging. I mean, managing a globe, a world of restaurants is difficult, and you need dedicated management teams and leadership teams and supply chain and all of that other stuff. It is not easy.
Yeah. It's a new world. So I know when I go to restaurantbusinessonline.com, the top right corner, there's a little button that says subscribe. Can you talk about what people are subscribing to, what they can expect and why they need to do it?
Sure. Well, so at Restaurant Business, you're going to get information and analysis that you're not really going to get anywhere else. So you have people like myself and my colleague Peter Romeo and who have been in the business a long time and we're sort of watching what's going on and analyzing and using some proprietary data that we have with sister company Technomic. We have a regular column from Technomic, which if you've heard of them is they collect a ton of data on the industry and they have a lot of really fantastic insights. So you're going to get things like that. You're going to get access to data such as our top 500 and same store sales and tracking the industry on that way. And then we do a lot of in-depth features and investigations and on the industry. We've got some pretty important stories, I think, coming up in the next few weeks, sort of on things involving Ghost Kitchens. Or one of Joe Guskowski, our technology editor, has been been doing some great work looking into cloud kitchens and some of the operational challenges that they're having and some of the issues that some of the operators are having with that. So that's kind of what you're going to get. You're going to get some of the best reporting in the industry.
Well, I love it. Get over to restaurantbusinessonline.com. Once you click the little pop-up and go right to the site, click that subscribe, check it out. It's got a lot of great information, and it's what you need, because I'm passionate that I feel like a lot of people, whether you're a one location independent operator or a CEO of a brand, it's your job to stay plugged in to what's happening. Because here I am yesterday reading the Harvard Business Journal, which is way the hell above my pay grade. And there's stuff in there that I'm like able to pull and go, man, this is a great opportunity for me to help my clients. And so that's what it is. Jonathan, safe travels to Dubai, and I will talk to you in the next couple months when you get back on the mainland.
Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan.